A vast collection of ancient wisdom vanished in a blaze of fire. The legendary Library of Alexandria was a treasure house for the entire classical world, and its loss remains one of our greatest tragedies. But the quest to resurrect its spirit is more urgent now than ever before. This journey through time will show you exactly how a modern, digital rebirth of this grand idea is taking shape across the globe. You will discover the secret methods being used to read unopenable scrolls and the global race to save our fragile digital memory from a similar fate. How much of our own history might be silently disappearing before our eyes? The ambition to gather every known book began not with a scholar, but with a king. Ptolemy I was a general under Alexander the Great, and when he founded a dynasty in Egypt, his vision was to build a new kind of capital, one defined not by military might but by the power of ideas. He wanted Alexandria to be the undeniable intellectual center of the entire world. To achieve this, he initiated the creation of the Great Library, a project so vast it aimed to collect a copy of every single scroll in existence. This was not merely an act of hoarding, it was a strategic move to centralize global knowledge, ensuring that any scholar who wished to study anything of importance would have to come to Alexandria. The library quickly became a magnet for the greatest thinkers of the age. Figures like Euclid, who systematized geometry, and Archimedes, whose mechanical genius was legendary, were drawn to this hub of scholarship. It was not a quiet archive, it was a vibrant academy, a living brain trust where ideas were debated, tested, and expanded. Scholars worked there, funded by the state, to advance human understanding in fields from astronomy to medicine. They did not just preserve knowledge, they actively created it. To fill its shelves, the Ptolemies employed famously aggressive methods. Every ship that docked in Alexandria's bustling harbor was searched for scrolls. Any texts found were taken to the library, where teams of scribes would copy them meticulously. The originals were often kept for the royal collection, while the copies were returned to the ship's owners. This practice, while controversial, underscores the sheer, uncompromising drive behind the project. They were building a universal memory for humanity, and no cost or effort was too great. This foundational dream of a single repository containing all the world's knowledge set a powerful precedent. It makes you wonder what monumental works and lost ideas were once housed within those walls, and what could we learn from them today? 500,000 scrolls filled the Great Library, a number that still staggers the mind. This was not a random assortment of texts. It was a deliberate effort to capture the entire intellectual output of the known world. Every subject imaginable had its place on those shelves, from the epic poetry of Homer to intricate studies of Egyptian surgical techniques. The ambition was absolute comprehensiveness, a complete map of human knowledge under one roof. To manage this universe of information, the library developed one of the first known library cataloging systems. A scholar named Callimachus is credited with creating the Pinax, a massive critical catalog that organized the entire collection by subject and author. It was a monumental work of bibliography in its own right, effectively creating a roadmap to navigate the sea of scrolls. Within this organized chaos were treasures we can now only dream of. The library held the original writings of Aristarchus of Samos, who argued that the Earth revolved around the Sun, a theory lost for centuries before being independently rediscovered. It contained complete sets of plays by the great tragedians like Aeschylus and Sophocles, the vast majority of which have since vanished from history. The sheer scale of what was curated and then lost represents a catastrophic hole in our collective story. This was a pinnacle of ancient information management, a system whose sophistication we are still coming to terms with. Realizing the sheer volume of unique thought that was concentrated in that one building makes its eventual fate feel all the more devastating. It frames the modern recovery effort not as a niche academic pursuit, but as a race to reclaim a part of our own identity. The first major blow to the Great Library arrived with the flash of fire on water. In the year 48 before the Common Era, Julius Caesar found himself trapped in a brutal political and military struggle within the very city that housed the world's knowledge. While besieged in the royal palace quarter, Caesar ordered his men to set fire to his own fleet of ships, which were docked in the harbor. His tactical goal was simple: to prevent his enemy, the forces of Ptolemy XIII, from capturing his vessels and using them against him. But fire is a notoriously difficult weapon to control. Ancient writers like Plutarch and Cassius Dio recorded that the flames leaped from the ships to the docks and then spread to warehouses. The critical ambiguity in their accounts lies in what exactly was stored in those buildings. Were they simply holding grain and supplies, or were they annexes of the Great Library itself, packed with precious scrolls? The historical record frustratingly refuses to give a clear answer. Some modern historians argue the damage was limited, that only a portion of the library's overflow collection, perhaps stored near the waterfront for safekeeping, was consumed. They point out that the library as an institution continued to function for centuries after this event. Others paint a far more devastating picture, suggesting that the fire represented an irreplaceable loss of hundreds of thousands of scrolls, a catastrophic bonfire of ancient wisdom. This single moment, born from the desperation of a Roman general, established a terrifying precedent. It demonstrated that the vast, centralized repository of human knowledge was profoundly vulnerable, not just to the slow decay of time, but to the sudden, violent whims of war and political conflict. The fate of the library was now inextricably tied to the turbulent history of the city it called home, foreshadowing a much more final disappearance still to come. The true soul of the Great Library was not in its scrolls, but in the minds it gathered. Within the halls of the Mouseion, the institution of learning attached to the library, the greatest thinkers of the ancient world found a home. They were not merely curators of knowledge, they were its engine, fueled by an unprecedented access to the world's ideas. Here, the act of reading and the act of discovery were one and the same. One of the most brilliant residents was Eratosthenes, the chief librarian. He was a man of boundless curiosity, and he used the library's resources to answer a question that had puzzled philosophers for centuries: how large is the Earth? By comparing the angle of the sun's shadow in two different Egyptian cities on the same day, and knowing the distance between them, he performed a calculation of stunning elegance. His result for the planet's circumference was accurate to within a few hundred miles, a feat of genius achieved over 2,000 years ago without any modern instruments. His work was only possible because the library provided the geographical records and mathematical texts that formed the foundation of his method. In a different wing, the physician Herophilus was making discoveries that would reshape medicine. The library gave him access to anatomical knowledge, but he pushed far beyond it. He performed public dissections of human cadavers, a practice that was revolutionary and controversial. Through this direct observation, he distinguished nerves from tendons, described the anatomy of the brain and the eye, and identified the pulse as a key diagnostic tool. His work laid the very foundations of human anatomy. The tragedy is that we know of these breakthroughs largely through the writings of others. The Roman physician Galen, working centuries later, would often lament the loss of the original texts from Alexandria, referring to them as irreplaceable sources that contain details and insights lost to his own time. This intellectual ecosystem, where scholars like Eratosthenes and Herophilus could build upon a shared foundation of global knowledge, demonstrates a profound truth. A library's ultimate value is not measured by the scrolls on its shelves, but by the new ideas it sparks into existence. The legacy of these thinkers provides a crucial benchmark for the scale of our loss, a haunting reminder of the collaborative genius that was once concentrated in that one place by the sea. Yet the Great Library was not a single, solitary fortress of knowledge. Its spirit extended to a second, magnificent institution, the Serapeum. This temple complex, dedicated to the Greco-Egyptian god Serapis, stood as the library's powerful daughter. It was more than just a place of worship. It was a major intellectual center in its own right, believed to have housed a vast duplicate collection of scrolls from the main library. For centuries after the harbor fires, the Serapeum endured, a bastion of classical thought and pagan religion in a city that was rapidly changing. It became the heart of Alexandria's cultural identity, a place where philosophers, priests, and ordinary citizens mingled under its grand colonnades. This peaceful coexistence was not to last. In the year 391 of the Common Era, the city was engulfed in a different kind of fire, one of religious and political fervor. The Roman Emperor Theodosius I had issued a series of decrees outlawing pagan worship across the empire. Seizing on this imperial command, the Patriarch of Alexandria, Theophilus, led a zealous Christian mob to the gates of the Serapeum. The goal was not merely to silence a rival faith, but to dismantle its physical and intellectual power. The mob stormed the temple, toppling the colossal statue of Serapis and systematically demolishing the building itself. The library within was ransacked, its duplicate scrolls likely burned or scattered, a second catastrophic loss for the accumulated wisdom of antiquity. This event is often blurred together with the earlier destruction, but it was a distinct and final blow. The burning of the ships in the harbor was a tragic accident of war, but the demolition of the Serapeum was a deliberate, ideological act. It signaled a profound shift in the world, a move away from the pluralistic intellectualism that the library represented. With the Serapeum's fall, a direct line to the ancient world was severed, and the long, slow dimming of classical learning entered a new and decisive phase. Centuries later, a final, dramatic story would be attached to the library's end, but this one is built on myth. The tale claims that in the year 642, the Arab general Amr ibn al-As conquered Alexandria and wrote to the Caliph Umar for instructions on what to do with the great book collection. The Caliph reportedly replied that if the books contained what was in the Quran, they were superfluous, and if they contradicted the Quran, they were heretical. Therefore, he ordered them all burned. The story goes that for 6 months, the scrolls fed the bathhouses of the city as fuel. It is a powerful and chilling narrative of ideological destruction, but modern historians have found no credible evidence that it ever happened. The first known account of this event appears not in the 7th century, but in the 13th, written over 600 years after the supposed fact. Scholars like Mustafa el-Abadi, a leading expert on the library's history, have thoroughly debunked it, pointing out that contemporary chroniclers from the Arab conquest make no mention of such a momentous act. So why has this myth persisted for so long? It often served a political purpose, used by later writers to frame a clash of civilizations or to assign blame for the loss of classical knowledge. The more complex and perhaps more tragic reality is that by the time Amr ibn al-As entered Alexandria, the Great Library as a functioning institution was almost certainly already a ghost. Its collections had likely been dispersed, lost to gradual decay, neglect, and the earlier political and religious upheavals that shook the city over centuries. Its final whisper was not a roar of flame, but the slow, quiet fading of ink on papyrus. Dispelling this myth is crucial because it shifts our understanding from a simple story of a single villain to a far more unsettling truth. The library did not die in one great fire. It suffered a death by 1,000 cuts, a slow erosion of value, attention, and care. This pattern of gradual loss, rather than dramatic annihilation, is a theme that haunts the history of knowledge, and one we will see again as we turn to the precarious state of our own modern records. The disappearance of the Great Library sent shockwaves through the entire intellectual world of antiquity. It was not an isolated tragedy, but the collapse of a central node in a fragile, interconnected web of knowledge. Other great centers of learning, which had thrived on the exchange of ideas with Alexandria, suddenly found themselves isolated and weakened. The legendary Library of Pergamum, a rival collection of over 200,000 parchment scrolls, had once been a vibrant hub of scholarship in its own right. Its very existence had spurred the Ptolemies in Alexandria to halt exports of papyrus, fearing competition, which in turn forced Pergamum to perfect the use of treated animal skins, giving us the word parchment. But without the constant, stimulating dialogue with its Egyptian counterpart, without the flow of new texts and theories coming from that great repository, Pergamum's significance began to fade. Its collections were eventually moved to Alexandria as a gift, a symbolic act that only underscored its diminishing role. Further west, the great philosophical schools of Athens, the academies of Plato and Aristotle, also felt the chill. For centuries, these institutions had been the training ground for the elite minds who would often travel to Alexandria to study and teach. They relied on the library's unparalleled archives to fuel their debates and refine their philosophies. As the routes of trade and travel grew more dangerous with the empire's fragmentation, that free flow of people and ideas slowed to a trickle. A scholar in Athens could no longer easily access a copy of a rare text held only in Alexandria. The conversations that had once spanned the Mediterranean became localized, insular, and ultimately less innovative. The dominoes were falling. The loss of that one central, organizing institution removed the gravitational center for the entire system of classical learning. It made every other library, every other school, more vulnerable to political upheaval, economic hardship, and simple neglect. This systemic collapse teaches us a vital and sobering lesson. Knowledge does not preserve itself in isolated silos. It thrives in robust, resilient networks. The strength of our collective memory has always depended on the number of copies in circulation and the number of pathways between them. When those connections are severed, the entire system becomes brittle. This ancient pattern of cascading failure offers a stark warning as we examine the intricate and surprisingly fragile digital networks that now hold the sum of our own civilization's memory. We can trace the ghostly outlines of what was lost by reading the footnotes of history. Later writers, from Roman scholars to early church fathers, frequently quoted and referenced texts that we can no longer read for ourselves. Their citations are like echoes in an empty hall, pointing to the vastness of the space that was once filled. One of the most painful gaps is in ancient drama. We have the works of Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides, but these are the exceptions. For the great masters of Greek Old Comedy, like Menander, we have almost nothing. These plays were celebrated for their sharp wit and intricate plots, offering a direct window into the social and political life of ancient Athens. We know they were performed and adored, but today we possess only fragments and papyrus scraps, forcing us to reconstruct a vibrant art form from its shattered pieces. Equally devastating is the loss of foundational historical works. A Babylonian priest named Berossus wrote a sweeping history of Mesopotamia, drawing directly from the cuneiform records and temple archives of his homeland. His work was a bridge between the ancient Near Eastern and Greek worlds, a priceless account of Babylonian culture, astronomy, and kingship. Other writers quoted him, but his own books are gone. This forces historians to piece together the story of one of the world's first civilizations through second-hand reports, a process akin to trying to understand a novel by reading only the book reviews. The scientific and philosophical losses are perhaps the most profound. We know of the pre-Socratic philosophers, thinkers like Democritus, who first proposed that all matter was made of atoms, primarily through the critiques of later writers like Aristotle. We are often reading their revolutionary ideas filtered through the lens of their intellectual rivals. This is like only hearing one side of a phone conversation, leaving us to guess at the full depth and nuance of the original argument. Even Aristotle himself is a victim of this fragmentation. The writings that made him famous in his own lifetime were his popular dialogues, works praised for their literary elegance. What survived for the modern world, however, are largely his technical, dry lecture notes, the textbooks used within his school. We possess the skeleton of his thought, but the living, breathing body of his popular work is missing. This catalogue of absence is not just a list of titles, it is a map of our own intellectual amnesia. Each lost work represents a branch of the human family tree that has been pruned away, leaving our understanding of the past lopsided and incomplete. The destruction of the Great Library did not just burn a building, it erased entire conversations, silenced unique voices, and created a silence that has lasted for millennia. This palpable sense of loss is precisely what has fueled an unending quest, a drive to fill in the blanks that has taken scholars and adventurers from dusty manuscript libraries to the most advanced scientific labs on Earth. Far from the smoldering ruins of Alexandria, a different kind of fire was being tended. In the cold, stone scriptoria of remote Irish monasteries and secluded Benedictine abbeys, a quiet, monumental rescue operation was underway. As war and political collapse plunged much of Europe into what we now call the Dark Ages, these communities became the unexpected guardians of a flickering flame. The vast, centralized network of classical knowledge had shattered, and its survival now depended on a fragile, decentralized chain of copyists. These monks, working by lamplight, took up the immense task of preserving what fragments of the ancient world had managed to drift to their shores. Their mission was not to create new philosophies, but to ensure the old ones did not vanish entirely from the earth. They became the human hard drives of their age, manually replicating data that was one disaster away from permanent deletion. The texts they saved were a lifeline. The poetic works of Virgil, the philosophical dialogues of Plato, the stirring orations of Cicero, all of these foundational pillars of Western thought were preserved not by empires or great libraries, but by the disciplined, repetitive labor of these dedicated scribes. Imagine a single illuminated manuscript like the breathtaking Book of Kells, its pages a riot of intricate, swirling art. That single book represents thousands of hours of painstaking work, a physical object of immense beauty that also served as a durable container for sacred and classical texts. This was conservation as a sacred duty. The monks saw their work as a form of prayer, a physical act of devotion that also happened to save civilization's blueprint. They did not typically add their own commentary or seek personal glory. Their names are mostly lost to history. Their legacy is the content they transmitted, the words they refused to let die. This model of preservation holds a powerful lesson for us today. It proves that knowledge can survive the collapse of its central institutions when it is distributed across many small, resilient, and deeply committed nodes. The monks did not have a grand plan to rebuild the Library of Alexandria. They were simply doing what they believed was right, one carefully inked letter at a time. And in that humble, persistent act, they built a bridge across 1,000 years of turmoil, a bridge that would eventually lead to the rediscoveries of the Renaissance. Their story reframes the quest for knowledge not as a search for a single, legendary treasure, but as the patient, ongoing work of countless guardians. This decentralized model, born from crisis, is precisely the philosophy that now guides the most ambitious projects to save our own era's knowledge from a similar, silent disappearance. While monks in Europe preserved the flame, a brilliant new sun was rising in the east. The Islamic Golden Age, spanning from the 8th to the 14th centuries, saw a spectacular flourishing of science, medicine, and philosophy that would ultimately act as a lifeboat for the classical knowledge slipping away in the West. This intellectual revolution was centered in Baghdad at an institution called the House of Wisdom. It was not merely a library, but a massive research academy and translation center, a direct spiritual successor to the dream of Alexandria. Under the patronage of enlightened caliphs, particularly Al-Mamun, it became the beating heart of a global knowledge network. Scholars were summoned from across the empire, regardless of their faith or background, with a single, monumental mission to gather all the world's learning and translate it into Arabic. This was not a passive act of preservation. It was an aggressive, state-funded campaign to capture the intellectual heritage of the Greeks, Persians, and Indians. Think of teams of scholars scouring the known world for manuscripts, paying for them in gold by weight, and bringing them back to Baghdad to be studied, debated, and translated. The scale of this effort was breathtaking, a systematic and deliberate rebuilding of the universal library that had been lost. Leading this charge were intellectual giants like Hunayn ibn Ishaq, a Nestorian Christian and the director of the House of Wisdom. He was a master translator who did not just mechanically convert Greek words into Arabic. He and his team, which included his son and his nephew, would hunt down multiple copies of a single text, compare them line by line to create a perfect master version, and then translate it with a deep understanding of its meaning. His translations of the works of Galen and Hippocrates became the standard medical textbooks for centuries. Another key figure was the philosopher Al-Kindi, who argued passionately that truth should be welcomed from wherever it comes, even if from distant nations and peoples alien to one's own. This philosophy of open-minded inquiry was the engine of the Golden Age. These scholars did not stop at translation. They used the Greek texts as a foundation for their own revolutionary work. The mathematician Al-Khwarizmi systematized algebra, a word derived from the title of his most famous book. The physician Al-Razi wrote a monumental medical encyclopedia that differentiated between smallpox and measles for the first time. The physicist Ibn al-Haytham conducted experiments in optics that debunked the ancient Greek theory of vision, establishing the principles of the camera obscura and laying the groundwork for the modern scientific method. This vast body of knowledge, now enriched with brilliant new commentary and discovery, did not remain locked in the East. Centuries later, as Europe began to stir from its long intellectual slumber, a new bridge was built. In places like the multicultural city of Toledo in Spain, after it was reconquered by Christian kingdoms, a second great translation movement began. Scholars, often teams of Jewish, Christian, and Muslim thinkers working together, began the colossal task of translating these Arabic texts and the Greek classics they contained into Latin. The works of Aristotle, which had been largely lost to Western Europe, returned not in their original Greek, but via their Arabic translations and commentaries. This was the missing fuel for the European Renaissance, the rediscovery of these texts filled with logical rigor and scientific observation, ignited the minds of thinkers from Thomas Aquinas to Roger Bacon. It is a profound historical irony. The knowledge of ancient Greece, lost in its original form, was saved by the Islamic world, expanded and refined, and then handed back to Europe to spark its rebirth. This cycle demonstrates a crucial truth about the life of ideas. Knowledge is not owned by any one culture. It is a river that can be dammed or diverted, but if its channels are kept open, it will always find a way to flow, to nourish new generations, and to ensure that the great conversations of humanity are never truly silenced. 500 years ago, a different kind of fire was lit in a workshop in Mainz. Johannes Gutenberg's invention of the printing press with movable type did not produce a destructive blaze, but a creative one, a fire of replication that would forever change the equation of knowledge preservation. For centuries, a book was a singular, precious object. A single monastery's copy of a classical text, painstakingly handwritten over months or years, was a fragile link in a chain. If that one manuscript was lost to fire, flood, or decay, the ideas it contained could vanish from the world forever. The printing press shattered this vulnerability. Now, a single text could spawn not one, but hundreds of identical copies, scattering them across cities and continents almost overnight. The catastrophic loss of a central repository, like the tragedy of Alexandria, became a virtual impossibility for any printed work. You could burn one library, but you could not burn them all. This was the birth of a new kind of resilience, a distributed immune system for human thought. Knowledge was no longer a flickering candle flame in one room. It was a constellation of identical lights spread across the landscape, ensuring that even if many were snuffed out, the others would keep burning. This mechanical reproduction broke the ancient monopoly held by monastic scriptoria and royal libraries. Learning began to seep out from behind stone walls and into the hands of merchants, lawyers, and curious citizens. The revived classical texts saved by the scribes and translated in the East were now mass-produced and widely available. Suddenly, the foundational works of Aristotle, Plato, and Galen were not locked away as rare treasures, but could be debated in public squares and studied in private homes. The very mission of the Great Library, to gather and share the world's knowledge, was reborn not in a single building, but in a distributed network of ink and paper. This was a democratization of learning on a scale the Ptolemies could never have conceived. The printed book became the ultimate backup system, a technology so effective that it defined the security of knowledge for the next 5 centuries. Yet this very success created a new kind of dependency, setting the stage for our next great leap and its unforeseen vulnerabilities. The dream of a universal library found its voice again not in stone or parchment, but in the silent hum of a computer terminal. In 1971, a man named Michael Hart launched a project so ambitious it echoed the vision of the Ptolemies, but with a revolutionary new tool. He called it Project Gutenberg, and its goal was to create a digital archive of 10,000 public domain books, a number that seemed fantastical at the time. This was the first concrete step toward a new Alexandria, one built not from papyrus and ink, but from binary code. The core dream remained unchanged: to gather all significant human knowledge into a single, universally accessible repository. The difference was one of pure, transformative scale. A physical library, no matter how grand, is limited by its walls, by the sheer weight and volume of paper. A digital library, by contrast, has a near infinite capacity. The entire contents of the Great Library of Alexandria could be stored on a device that fits in the palm of your hand, and then copied and sent across the planet in seconds. This solved the ancient problem of physical access, shattering the geographical barriers that had isolated scholars for millennia. For For the first time, the dream of a true library of everything seemed not just possible, but imminent. Yet this new medium, for all its power, introduced a set of vulnerabilities the ancients could never have imagined. A scroll can survive for centuries in a dry cave, its ink still readable to the naked eye. A digital file, however, exists in a state of perpetual fragility. It is trapped in a format that requires specific hardware and software to interpret. The floppy disks and magnetic tapes of just a few decades ago are already becoming unreadable, their data locked away as the machines needed to read them vanish into obsolescence. A single corrupted bit can render an entire text into gibberish, and a well-placed magnet can erase more information than was lost in the fire at Alexandria. This is the paradox of the digital age. We have built the most comprehensive library in history, but we have constructed it on a foundation that can vanish without a trace, leading us toward a potential digital dark age where future generations find our own era a silent, unreadable blank. The quest has shifted from simply gathering knowledge to the urgent, complex task of making it last. The silent hum of digital promise grew into a global roar in 2004. Google announced its library project, a plan so audacious it seemed plucked from the dreams of the ancient Ptolemies. The goal was to scan every single book in the world, creating a searchable, universal digital library. This was not just an archive, it was an attempt to resurrect the ghost of Alexandria on a scale its founders could never have conceived. The project forged partnerships with some of the planet's most prestigious libraries, including Harvard, Stanford, and the University of Oxford. Their vast collections, representing millions of unique volumes, were to be the foundation of this new global brain. The technical process itself was a marvel of modern engineering. Specially designed, non-destructive scanning stations used infrared cameras and sophisticated software to gently curve the pages of a book, capturing their text without flattening or damaging the spine. It was a factory of digitization, processing thousands of books a day, transforming silent, dusty shelves into a vibrant, searchable river of data. For the first time, a researcher in a small town could find a specific phrase buried deep within a rare, out-of-print volume held only in an Oxford vault. The dream of universal access was, it seemed, finally within our grasp. But this modern quest quickly collided with an ancient tension, the conflict between open access and ownership. A coalition of authors and major publishers filed a massive class action lawsuit, alleging that Google's scanning of copyrighted works constituted massive copyright infringement. They argued that a for-profit corporation was effectively seizing their intellectual property without permission or fair compensation, building its commercial empire on the back of their creative labor. The courtroom became a new kind of library hall, where lawyers debated the very soul of knowledge in the digital age. Google defended its actions under the legal principle of fair use, claiming that scanning books to create a search index, while only showing small snippets of text in search results, was a transformative act that served the public good. The case dragged on for years, a complex and bitter struggle that forced everyone to confront difficult questions. Who, in the 21st century, should be the custodian of our collective bookshelf? Can a single commercial entity, no matter how well-intentioned, be trusted with the stewardship of humanity's written heritage? The dream of a universal library was suddenly mired in a very modern dilemma, proving that the greatest obstacles to rebuilding Alexandria are no longer fire or decay, but the intricate and often contradictory laws and values of our own time. This legal battle revealed that the path to a digital future for our past is not a straight line of technological progress, but a winding road paved with profound philosophical choices. While Google's legal battles reshaped the corporate landscape of digital knowledge, a radically different vision was taking root across the continent. In San Francisco, a digital librarian named Brewster Kahle was building his own library of everything, not for profit but for the people. His creation, the Internet Archive, stands as the non-profit, open-access counterpart to corporate projects, a living monument to the belief that knowledge should be a public commons, not a private asset. Kahle's ambition was breathtakingly simple, and for that reason, staggeringly complex. He wanted to give everyone with an internet connection a digital library card to the entirety of human culture. This was not merely an archive, it was an act of democratic defiance. The collections he began to amass went far beyond the printed word. The Internet Archive became a museum of digital life itself. It houses millions of books, yes, but also a sprawling universe of software, vintage computer games, thousands of hours of television news broadcasts, and an immense trove of audio recordings from old radio shows to live concert bootlegs. It preserves the quirky, the commercial, the forgotten, and the famous, arguing that to understand our era, you need the entire cultural record, not just the works deemed important by publishers or professors. Its most famous and vital tool is the Wayback Machine. Think of the internet as a city that is constantly rebuilding itself, where buildings vanish overnight and streets are rerouted without a trace. The Wayback Machine is a time machine for this ephemeral landscape. It takes snapshots of websites, capturing their exact appearance on a given day, a political promise made on a candidate's website and later deleted, the original design of a beloved webcomic, the frantic news updates from a natural disaster. All of these digital moments that would otherwise evaporate are frozen in time. This is the preservation of the web's living memory, a direct response to the digital decay that threatens to erase our most contemporary history. The Internet Archive consciously mirrors the decentralized, resilient model of the medieval monasteries, scattering copies of its data across servers in multiple countries to ensure that no single fire, whether physical or legal, can destroy its mission. Yet this modern Alexandria is not immune to the pressures of the modern world. It operates under a constant state of financial precarity, relying on donations and grants to fuel its colossal storage needs. More pointedly, it walks a perpetual legal tightrope. While its scanning of books often relies on a controlled digital lending model, similar to a physical library lending out one digital copy at a time, it has faced its own fierce lawsuits from publishers who see this as a threat to their copyright. The very existence of the Internet Archive, constantly navigating these challenges, is a powerful testament. It proves that the spirit of the Great Library, that relentless drive to collect and share, is not dead. It lives on in the quiet dedication of modern archivists who believe that preserving our collective story is a battle worth fighting every single day. 2,000 years after its namesake vanished into smoke, a new library rose from the same storied shore. The Bibliotheca Alexandrina, inaugurated in 2002, is not a replica of the ancient wonder, but a breathtaking declaration of its undying spirit. Its architecture speaks a language of cosmic ambition. The main building is a colossal, tilting disk representing a second sun rising beside the Mediterranean. Its granite wall is carved with letters and symbols from every known writing system, a literal and figurative tapestry of human thought. This is a building designed not just to house books, but to embody the very idea of universal knowledge. Its mission echoes that of the original Mouseion, to be a vibrant center for dialogue, learning, and research, a place where cultures meet and new ideas are forged. It contains not only millions of books but also planetariums, museums, and art galleries, creating a true ecosystem of curiosity. Perhaps most importantly, the new library has embraced the digital world with a profound sense of purpose. It hosts one of the most significant internet archives in the region, running its own ambitious digitization projects to preserve Egyptian and Arabic literary heritage. It actively works to save crumbling manuscripts and fragile books, ensuring they survive not just as physical objects, but as immortal digital files, safe from the fires that claimed their predecessors. This modern institution serves as a physical anchor for the global effort to reclaim what was lost, a permanent headquarters for the quest we have been tracing. It bridges the city's legendary past with its dynamic future, a stone and steel promise that the desire to gather and protect knowledge is an unbreakable human impulse. The library stands on the waterfront as a symbol of resilience, a direct challenge to the forces of oblivion. It proves that while a library can be burned, the dream it represents is truly fireproof. The ultimate loss is not a burned book, but one whose language has been forgotten. For centuries, the great civilizations of the Minoans on Crete and the imperial dynasties of Egypt whispered to us through inscriptions we could see but not understand. Their histories, laws, and stories were trapped behind a cipher, as silent as if they had never been written. The first great crack in this wall of silence came with a slab of black granite pulled from the Egyptian mud. The Rosetta Stone was not aesthetically beautiful, but it was linguistically perfect. It bore the same decree in 3 scripts, sacred Egyptian hieroglyphs, the Demotic script used for everyday documents, and crucially, ancient Greek. Scholars had a clear, known language to use as a key for the 2 unknown ones. The real breakthrough came from a young Frenchman named Jean-François Champollion, who realized the hieroglyphs were not just pictorial symbols but a complex mix of sound signs and ideograms. He identified the phonetic values in the names of rulers like Ptolemy and Cleopatra, and that single key began to click open lock after lock. An entire civilization's written record, from royal chronicles to temple accounts, suddenly became an open book, recovering millennia of history that the fire at Alexandria had helped to obscure. This same intellectual thrill of discovery echoed again in the 20th century with a much more enigmatic script. Linear B was found on clay tablets across Crete and mainland Greece, the administrative records of a lost Bronze Age palace culture. For decades, the finest minds in the world tried and failed to break its code. The architect Michael Ventris, an amateur linguist with a brilliant, puzzle-solving mind, took up the challenge. He worked like a cryptographer, assuming the script represented an early form of Greek. He looked for patterns in the words, searching for the names of cities that were known to be important in that era. When he successfully isolated the place names like Knossos and Amnisos, the entire structure of the language fell into place. In one breathtaking moment, mundane lists of chariot wheels and cattle suddenly gave voice to the Mycenaean Greeks, the people who would have fought the Trojan War. It was a recovery of a world that existed only in myth, proving that even the driest bureaucracy can whisper secrets across 3,000 years. Yet for every success story, there remains a tantalizing lock without a key. Linear A, the script used by the earlier Minoan civilization on Crete, still defiantly guards its secrets. We can see its signs, we can even recognize some from Linear B, but the language it represents is completely unknown and unrelated to any we understand. The same is true for the intricate symbols of the Indus Valley civilization, a contemporary of ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia. Thousands of seals and tablets covered in a beautiful, pictographic script taunt us from the ruins of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro. We have no Rosetta Stone for them, no bilingual inscription to give us a starting point. These unreadable texts are the ghost libraries of our modern age, entire Alexandrias of information about trade, religion, and daily life that are completely silent to us. The quest to hear these voices again is now a high-tech endeavor. Computational linguists feed every known symbol and its context into powerful algorithms, searching for the statistical patterns of grammar and syntax that might reveal the underlying language structure. This is a new kind of archaeology, one that digs not with a trowel but with processing power, fighting the fires of time with data and deduction. The very existence of these undeciphered scripts is a powerful reminder that the recovery of lost knowledge is not a task we have finished. It is an active, urgent mission, a race to unlock the final, silent rooms of our own past before their echoes fade away completely. A volcanic inferno that destroyed one town also performed a miracle of preservation. While Pompeii was buried in ash, the neighboring resort of Herculaneum was hit by a superheated pyroclastic surge, carbonizing everything in its path. In a luxurious villa thought to belong to a Roman statesman, an entire library of papyrus scrolls was instantly baked into black, brittle lumps of charcoal. For centuries, these artifacts were dismissed as hopeless, their contents locked away by the very disaster that saved them from decay. Any attempt to physically unroll them would cause them to crumble into dust, making them the ultimate unreadable books. They were ghosts, tangible yet silent. This collection, known as the Herculaneum Papyri, became archaeology's greatest tease, a library of several hundred scrolls you could hold in your hands but never read. The potential was staggering. This was not a medieval copy of a lost work, but an original scroll from the 1st century, a direct snapshot of a Roman aristocrat's personal library. It could contain lost masterpieces of Greek philosophy, plays, or poems that the scholars in Alexandria would have known, texts that vanished from every other record. The challenge was to find a way to see inside without turning them to ash a second time. The breakthrough began with a technology borrowed from medicine. Researchers realized that a high-resolution computed tomography scanner, the same kind used for detailed medical imaging, could peer through the carbonized layers. The scans produced stunningly clear three-dimensional models of the scroll's internal structure, revealing each individual wound layer of papyrus with incredible precision. But there was a second, more difficult problem. The intense heat had carbonized the papyrus and the ink, making them virtually identical in density. On a CT scan, the writing was invisible, blending perfectly into the page. The answer came from the sky, or more precisely, from a technology developed for satellite imaging. Scientists turned to multi-spectral imaging, a process that captures light reflected from an object at many different wavelengths, far beyond what the human eye can see. By analyzing how the surface reflected infrared and other types of light, they discovered a subtle difference between the carbon-based ink and the carbonized papyrus. A hidden text began to shimmer into view, letter by letter. This is a painstaking digital excavation. Researchers, including a team fueled by a global competition offering large cash prizes, are now using machine learning to train algorithms to recognize the faintest traces of these letters within the scanned data. They are virtually unrolling the scrolls in a computer, layer by delicate layer, and then applying spectral filters to make the ink appear. It is like developing a photograph of a ghost. The rewards are already emerging, revealing Greek texts dealing with pleasure, music, and the senses, themes central to the philosopher Epicurus, whose own vast body of work is almost entirely lost. The villa itself is called the Villa of the Papyri, and it may have been a center for Epicurean philosophy. The possibility that we could recover a complete, original work by Epicurus or even a lost dialogue by Aristotle is no longer a fantasy. It is a tangible goal at the forefront of a technological revolution. This work does more than just read a scroll, it proves a profound point. The fires of Vesuvius and the fires that consumed Alexandria represent two sides of the same coin, one preserving through destruction and the other destroying utterly. The techniques being perfected on the Herculaneum Papyri offer a new kind of fire extinguisher for the past, a way to rescue words from the brink of permanent silence. If we can read a scroll turned to stone by a volcano, what other lost libraries, hidden in caves or sealed tombs, might we yet be able to open? Far to the east, as the libraries of the Mediterranean flickered, another great repository was being carved into a desert cliff face. The Mouseion caves near Dunhuang were not merely a religious site, but a sprawling, thousand-year-old university of art and scripture, a crucial node on the vibrant Silk Road. Here, in the heart of the arid desert, monks and merchants created a library designed to withstand the very ravages of time that had consumed the West. The dry air acted as a perfect preservative, desiccating scrolls and paintings that would have molded away in a more humid climate. This was knowledge saved by geography, a vast collection waiting silently in the dark. Then, in 1900, a Taoist monk named Wang Yuanlu was clearing sand from one of the caves when he tapped on a wall and heard a hollow echo. Behind a false wall, he made one of the most spectacular discoveries in archaeological history, a hidden library chamber sealed for nearly a millennium. It was stuffed floor to ceiling with an unimaginable treasure, not of gold but of paper and silk. Tens of thousands of manuscripts, intricate paintings on silk banners, and ancient textiles had been perfectly preserved in the desert dryness. This was not a single culture's archive, but a multicultural crossroads frozen in time. The texts were written in Chinese, Tibetan, Sanskrit, and even Old Uyghur, a testament to the diverse travelers who passed through this oasis. There were beautifully copied Buddhist sutras, their devotional prayers intended to guide the soul toward enlightenment. But just as importantly, there were secular documents, the mundane paperwork of daily life along the trade routes, loan contracts, legal petitions, and personal letters. A single cache could contain a philosophical discourse on emptiness next to a merchant's list of spices and debts. This offers us a panoramic view of an entire world, capturing both its highest spiritual aspirations and its most grounded economic realities. The Dunhuang libraries fundamentally reshape our understanding of the Great Library concept. They prove that while Alexandria was burning, other centers of learning were thriving, creating a distributed, resilient network of knowledge that spanned the entire continent. The dream of a universal library was never contained within one building's walls. It was carried on the backs of camels and preserved in the dry silence of a desert cave, waiting for a future that would finally learn to listen. The tragedy of a burning library is not confined to the ancient world. In our own century, the same brutal script has been played out, proving that the destruction of knowledge remains a weapon of choice for those who wish to erase a people's identity. The invasion of Iraq in 2003 created a power vacuum that led to immediate chaos, and one of the first casualties was the nation's memory. The National Library and Archive in Baghdad was systematically looted and set ablaze. Rampaging crowds, along with organized criminal elements, tore through the building, carrying away priceless Ottoman-era documents, royal decrees, and irreplaceable maps. The fires that followed consumed centuries of Iraqi history, turning delicate manuscripts into ash. This was not collateral damage, it was a targeted assault on the very soul of a civilization, a calculated effort to strip a people of their past in order to control their future. Just over a decade later, a different kind of ideological fire swept through Mosul. When ISIS militants seized the city, they stormed the library of the University of Mosul. They did not simply burn the books, they filmed themselves doing it. They dragged texts into the courtyard, doused them in fuel, and set them alight in a grotesque spectacle. Their targets were carefully chosen, any work they deemed heretical to their extremist worldview, from philosophy texts and poetry collections to historical archives and science journals. This was a chilling echo of the mob that tore down the Serapeum, a performative act of cultural annihilation designed to show total dominance. Yet in the face of this terror, a different, quieter story unfolded. In both Baghdad and Mosul, ordinary people became heroes. Librarians, professors, and citizens risked their lives in daring, clandestine operations to save what they could. They hid precious manuscripts in their homes, smuggled documents out in food trucks, and created secret caches in basements and abandoned buildings. They understood that they were not just saving paper, they were safeguarding their community's right to exist, to remember who they were. Their courage laid the foundation for a global digital rescue mission. In the aftermath, international teams worked with local scholars to digitally reconstruct the lost collections. They gathered microfilm copies that had been sent to universities abroad before the war, scanned surviving private collections, and used advanced photographic techniques to resurrect texts from the charred fragments that remained. This modern, distributed network of preservation is our best defense against the centralized violence of the torch. It proves that while a library building can be destroyed, the connections between people who value knowledge can form a new, unburnable library in its place. The sobering truth is that the fires of Alexandria never truly went out. They smolder in the hearts of every tyrant and extremist who understands that to control the future, you must first destroy the past. Our fight to protect the written word is not a relic of history. It is a continuous, urgent battle being waged in real time. Our new digital library is not burning, it is fading. The greatest threat to our modern Alexandria is not a sudden blaze, but a slow, silent decay. We have traded papyrus for pixels, and in doing so, we have inherited a new set of vulnerabilities the ancients never faced. The first is a problem called bit rot. This is the slow, undetectable degradation of data stored on physical media. A hard drive or a CD-ROM is not a stone tablet, it is a fragile object. Its magnetic fields can weaken over time, and microscopic flaws can develop, turning crucial pieces of information into digital gibberish. A single corrupted character in a line of code can render an entire file unreadable, a quiet death for a document that might have survived for centuries on paper. Then there is the challenge of format obsolescence. Think of a floppy disk from the 1990s. The disk itself might be in perfect physical condition, resting safely in a drawer. But it is a sealed treasure chest for which we have thrown away the key. The drives to read it are museum pieces, and the software needed to interpret the file formats, like early word processing programs, no longer runs on any modern computer. The knowledge is there, but it is trapped behind a technological wall, as silent as an undeciphered scroll. This problem extends to the very fabric of the internet through a phenomenon known as link rot. How many times have you clicked on a reference in an old article, only to be met with a 404 error, a digital dead end? Academic studies have shown that a significant percentage of web links in scholarly publications become broken within a few years. Entire websites full of community knowledge, personal blogs, and vital data can vanish when a hosting fee lapses or a company decides to shut down its servers. This is a slow fire consuming the ephemeral records of our daily lives, the very digital memories we assumed would last forever. The platforms we trust to hold our collective story, from social media giants to cloud storage services, are not permanent institutions. They are businesses that can fail or change their priorities overnight, taking our shared knowledge with them. This is the specter of a digital dark age, a future where historians look back at our era and find vast, silent gaps. Our emails, our photos, our public discourse, all lost not to a volcano's wrath, but to simple neglect and technological progress. Preserving this fragile digital inheritance requires a new kind of priesthood, one dedicated not to copying manuscripts by hand, but to the continuous, active migration of data from old formats to new ones, and to creating software emulators that can mimic obsolete systems. It is a race against time, a lesson we are learning from the crumbled, carbonized scrolls of Herculaneum and the ashes of Alexandria. The work of these modern guardians is a quiet, constant battle to ensure that the brilliant light of our digital rebirth does not dim into a forgetful gloom. Who holds the key to the digital vault of human culture? This new scramble to digitize the world's knowledge is forcing a difficult and necessary conversation about ownership, consent, and power. For many indigenous communities, the very idea of a universal, open-access library can feel like a new form of colonization. Their traditional knowledge, from sacred songs and medicinal plant lore to intricate family histories, has been passed down through generations under strict protocols of secrecy and respect. This knowledge is not merely information, it is a living, breathing part of their cultural and spiritual identity. To scan it and place it on a public server, accessible to anyone with an internet connection, is to strip it of its context and its power. It violates the very systems that have protected it for centuries. The ethical dilemma is stark. On one side lies the Enlightenment ideal of open knowledge, the belief that information wants to be free and that sharing it universally is an inherent good. On the other stands the principle of traditional knowledge ownership, which argues that some forms of understanding are not commodities to be collected and distributed, but sacred trusts that belong to specific peoples. Is it ethical for an outside researcher to digitize and publish a tribe's creation stories, even if their intention is preservation, when the community itself has chosen to keep that knowledge oral and private? This conflict forces us to redefine what we mean by preservation. Is the goal simply to save the data from physical decay, or is it to honor the living culture that gives that data its meaning? The tension deepens when we look at the vast collections held in museums and libraries in Europe and North America. Countless artifacts, manuscripts, and human remains were taken from colonized nations during periods of imperial expansion, often under duress or through blatantly unequal power dynamics. Today, these objects sit in climate-controlled vaults thousands of miles from their places of origin. The digitization of these collections creates a new layer of complexity. A museum might proudly scan and upload high-resolution images of a sacred ceremonial mask from West Africa, making it available for the whole world to see. But to the community from which it was taken, this digital display can feel like a continued act of possession, a denial of their right to control their own cultural narrative and to decide when and how such a powerful object should be viewed. The question of digital repatriation is now at the forefront. Does putting a stolen object online for free constitute a form of restitution, or does it simply reinforce the power of the institution that holds the physical item? Some museums are pioneering new collaborative models. They are working directly with source communities to create digital archives that respect cultural protocols, perhaps by restricting access to certain sensitive images to initiated members only, or by ensuring that the digital metadata accurately reflects the community's own terminology and stories. This shifts the process from one of extraction to one of partnership, acknowledging that building a true library of everything requires not just technical skill, but deep cultural humility. The dream of a new Alexandria cannot be built on a foundation of historical injustice. It demands that we listen to the voices of those whose knowledge we seek to preserve, and recognize that sometimes the most respectful way to honor a culture is to let it keep its secrets. This silent decay finds its most powerful adversary in the quiet hum of artificial intelligence. Machine learning algorithms are now being trained to see what the human eye cannot, to read the unreadable. The charred scrolls from Herculaneum present a perfect example of this new alliance between silicon and scholarship. Researchers feed thousands of high-resolution scans into a neural network, a type of eye modeled loosely on the human brain. They train this digital mind by showing it examples of tiny, faint ink traces that human experts have identified as letters. The algorithm learns the subtle, spectral signature of the ancient ink, and then it begins its work, scanning the virtual layers of a rolled-up scroll and highlighting the ghostly shapes of characters that are completely invisible to us. This is not a simple search function, it is a form of digital perception, giving us a new sense with which to examine the past. But the power of this tool extends far beyond reading carbonized papyrus. Imagine a scholar working with 1,000 fragments of a shattered clay tablet, each piece bearing a few cuneiform signs. For a human, piecing this puzzle together could take a lifetime. An eye, however, can analyze the handwriting, the vocabulary, and the grammatical patterns on every single fragment in a collection, and then run millions of comparisons in seconds, suggesting which pieces might fit together based on statistical probability. It can act as a superhuman research assistant, cross-referencing concepts across entire digital libraries in multiple languages. It might, for instance, identify a unique philosophical term in a newly deciphered Greek text and instantly find a parallel discussion in a poorly understood Coptic manuscript from Egypt, proposing a connection that no single scholar, no matter how widely read, could have possibly spotted. This represents a quantum leap in our capacity to process the past. We are no longer limited by the speed of human reading or the fragility of human memory. We are entering an era where we can computationally recover texts we did not even know were missing, where an algorithm can sift through the static of damaged documents and reassemble the whispers of lost authors. This technology offers a tantalizing glimpse of a future where the fire that consumed the Great Library is no longer an absolute end, but merely a difficult problem waiting for the right key. The scrolls of Herculaneum are not being unrolled by a single scholar in a lab, but by a retired teacher in Tokyo and a college student in Brazil. This is the new face of archaeology, a global army of citizen scientists who are logging on after dinner to help rescue our collective past. Platforms like Zooniverse host projects such as Ancient Lives, which places a vast collection of ancient Greek papyrus fragments, direct from the sands of Egypt, onto the computer screens of volunteers everywhere. These are not pristine manuscripts, but tiny, torn pieces often covered in faded script or damaged by time. The task is simple yet profound. Volunteers use their mouse to draw lines over the Greek letters they see on these digital images, effectively transcribing the text one character at a time. There are no prerequisites, no tests to pass, just a willingness to look carefully and help. This process tackles a problem that has long plagued papyrology, the sheer, overwhelming volume of material. For generations, a small number of experts could only work through these fragments at a glacial pace, with countless boxes of unpublished pieces sitting in university basements, their secrets locked away not by fire, but by a simple lack of human hours. Now that bottleneck is being shattered by the power of distributed curiosity. Every mark a volunteer makes contributes to a massive, crowdsourced dataset. When multiple people transcribe the same fragment, their work is cross-checked for accuracy, creating a reliable digital text that scholars can then analyze and interpret. The results are staggering. This collective effort has already identified lost poems by Sappho, unknown gospels, and fragments of plays by the great tragedians, discoveries that would have taken decades under the old system. This is the ultimate democratization of the Great Library's mission. You no longer need a royal patron or a PhD to walk its halls. All you need is an internet connection and a desire to connect with a voice from 2,000 years ago. It builds a global community, a digital Mouseion where a grandmother in Canada and a software engineer in India can work side by side, united by the thrill of being the first person in millennia to read a line of text. This model fundamentally reshapes our relationship with history. It proves that the responsibility for our shared heritage is not just the job of academics in ivory towers, but a collective human endeavor. It shows that when we all contribute just a little, we can together achieve the impossible, piecing our story back together, one tiny fragment at a time. This sprawling institution in Washington, D.C., stands as a testament to what a nation can achieve when it dedicates itself to the ideal of a universal library. The Library of Congress began with a simple, practical purchase, a collection of books for the nation's lawmakers, but its mission has expanded to an almost Ptolemaic scale. Its mandate is to acquire, preserve, and provide access to a comprehensive record of human knowledge from every corner of the globe and in every format imaginable. With more than 170 million items, its collections are breathtaking in their diversity. You can find the contents of Abraham Lincoln's pockets on the night he was assassinated, the earliest known film of a sneeze, and over 3 million recordings of music and the human voice, from folk songs to political speeches. This is not just a library, it is the nation's memory, a conscious effort to create a collection so vast that no important thought or event is ever truly lost. To manage this ocean of information, the Library of Congress has become a global leader in preservation science. Its conservation labs are frontline hospitals for ailing books and fragile photographs. Experts use tools ranging from simple brushes to sophisticated sonic welders to repair damaged bindings, to acidify brittle paper and stabilize crumbling photographs. They have pioneered standards for digital preservation that are used worldwide, creating trusted digital repositories and file formats designed to last for centuries. This work is the modern equivalent of the scribes in the scriptorium, a dedicated cadre of professionals fighting a constant, quiet war against the inevitable decay of physical and digital objects. Yet the scale of the challenge is almost incomprehensible. How do you decide what to save when you are receiving 10,000 new items every single working day? The library must constantly navigate difficult choices, balancing the preservation of historic newspapers against the acquisition of today's most influential blogs, or deciding how to archive the ephemeral world of social media. Its ongoing struggle to manage both the immense physical legacy of the past and the exploding digital output of the present offers a powerful microcosm of the global preservation effort. The Library of Congress proves that the dream of Alexandria is alive, but it also reveals the immense, continuous cost of keeping that dream from fading into the same silence that consumed the original. The loss of a single nation's archive is a wound to the memory of all humanity. This profound idea, forged in the fires of historical tragedies like the burning of the National Library of Bosnia and Herzegovina, led the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization to establish the Memory of the World program in 1992. It is a global declaration that our documentary heritage does not belong to any one country, but is a shared inheritance for all people, a treasure that must be guarded against the ever-present threats of collective amnesia, willful neglect, and the violence of war. This program acts as a global custodian, a kind of United Nations for the world's most fragile and significant documents. Its international register is not merely a list, it is a map of our collective soul, pinpointing the most vital records of our triumphs, our struggles, and our creativity. Here, you will find the iconic alongside the intimate. The Gutenberg Bible, a symbol of the revolution in knowledge sharing, is listed alongside the haunting archives of the Warsaw Ghetto, a collection of secret documents buried in milk cans by a dying community determined to bear witness. It includes the intricate soundscapes of the Persian Gulf's pearl diving records, capturing the songs and rhythms of a vanishing maritime culture, and the original manuscript of Anne Frank's diary, a young girl's voice that speaks for millions. By inscribing these items, the program provides more than just prestige. It offers a crucial framework for coordination, helping to direct international expertise and funding to where it is needed most. It lends legitimacy to local preservationists, strengthening their hand when they argue for the importance of a crumbling archive. This global network is the institutional embodiment of the lesson learned from Alexandria's ashes. It acknowledges that no single library, no matter how well funded, can stand alone against the tides of time and conflict. Our knowledge is a common wealth, and its protection is a responsibility we all share, a promise to the future that the most fragile pages of our story will not be allowed to silently disappear. A single broken link is a tiny digital death. This is the phenomenon known as link rot, and it is quietly unraveling the fabric of our modern knowledge. We often treat the internet as a permanent, searchable library, but the reality is far more fragile. The average web page has a lifespan of only about 100 days before it is altered or disappears completely. A cited source in a scientific paper, a government report, a news article documenting a pivotal event, all can vanish, leaving behind a 404 error message, a digital dead end. This creates a modern ghost library of lost information, a silent crisis of citation where the evidence for our claims can evaporate overnight. It is as if footnotes in a history book were written in disappearing ink, forcing future readers to take our word for what was once there. The problem is compounded by the very nature of the web, a dynamic tapestry where pages are constantly updated, redesigned, or simply taken down when a hosting bill goes unpaid. How can we build a reliable record of our time when its primary medium is so inherently transient? The fight against this decay has spawned crucial initiatives. Projects like perma.cc, developed by university libraries, allow authors to create permanent, unbreakable links for their online citations, archiving a snapshot of a web page at the moment it is referenced. On a colossal scale, the Internet Archive's relentless web crawlers constantly traverse the online world, taking billions of snapshots of websites to preserve their ever-changing state in the Wayback Machine. These are the digital equivalent of the monastic scribes, working tirelessly to copy the world's knowledge before it fades. Yet preserving a static page is one thing. Capturing the living, interactive experience of the modern web, with its complex databases and personalized content, is a challenge of another magnitude entirely. It demands a fundamental shift in our mindset, where we no longer assume the internet will remember for us, but actively choose to save the digital conversations that define our era. The original Library of Alexandria was built on a radical principle for its time: open access for any qualified scholar who sought its halls. This foundational commitment to sharing knowledge freely is the very soul that must animate its modern rebirth. Today, that spirit finds its most powerful expression in the open access movement, a global effort to make scholarly research available to everyone, instantly and without cost. This stands in stark contrast to the traditional model that dominates academia, where publicly funded research is published in journals that are then sold back to universities through expensive subscriptions, locking the results behind digital paywalls. Imagine a scientist in a developing nation, a curious high school student, or an independent inventor, all barred from reading the latest discoveries because their institution cannot afford the soaring fees. This system does not merely restrict access, it actively silences the global conversation that the Great Library was meant to foster. It risks creating a future where the knowledge we produce today becomes the lost, inaccessible scrolls of tomorrow. The true heirs to Alexandria's mission are projects built on this philosophy of openness. The preprint server RZiv allows physicists and mathematicians to share their findings with the world the moment they are written, bypassing the slow, gated process of traditional publishing. The Internet Archive fights to keep our digital commons open and free. These are not just databases, they are the bustling, modern reading rooms of our global Mouseion, where the only requirement for entry is curiosity. This philosophical choice to prioritize access over profit is what transforms a mere collection of data into a living library. It ensures that the fire of discovery, once concentrated in one vulnerable building, is now a distributed flame, burning brightly on millions of screens, finally making the ancient dream of universal knowledge a practical, modern reality for all. Buried beneath layers of earth and time, entire libraries could be resting in perfect silence. The quest to find them no longer relies on guesswork or the destructive swing of a pickaxe. Instead, archaeologists now peer into the ground with a kind of technological clairvoyance, using tools like ground-penetrating radar. This device sends harmless radio waves deep into the soil, which bounce back to create a detailed sonogram of the unseen world below. It can reveal the ghostly outlines of buried walls, pathways, and chambers, mapping a complete city plan without ever breaking the surface. This is how we might finally locate legendary sites like the Royal Library of Pergamum, a rival to Alexandria whose exact location remains a tantalizing mystery. Imagine sweeping a field in modern Turkey and seeing the distinct rectangular shape of a large public building appear on the screen, a structure that matches the description of that ancient academy. That non-invasive glimpse is the first step toward a potential discovery of unimaginable scale. Another revolutionary tool, LiDAR, works from the sky. Mounted on planes or drones, it fires millions of laser pulses at a landscape, piercing dense jungle canopies to map the ground beneath. It has already revealed vast, lost Mayan cities in Central America, completely rewriting our understanding of that civilization. In the search for knowledge caches, LiDAR could identify isolated, secure structures built in remote areas, places where communities might have hidden their most precious texts from invading armies. These technologies transform the search from a hopeful dig into a targeted investigation. They offer the thrilling possibility that somewhere, in a sealed, climate-controlled chamber untouched by fire or flood, an entire collection of scrolls has survived the millennia intact. Finding such a cache would be the archaeological equivalent of striking gold. It would not be just one lost play or philosophical text, but an entire lost conversation, a complete bookshelf from the ancient world delivered directly to our hands. This is the new frontier in the hunt for our lost heritage, a quiet scan that could one day lead to the loudest historical echo ever heard. Even if a time machine could take us back to Alexandria's peak, we could never truly reconstruct its library. The heart of that place was not merely the scrolls themselves, but the specific, unrepeatable intellectual ecosystem they created. We might use our machine to copy every text on every shelf, gathering a perfect duplicate of the physical collection. But the true magic, the spontaneous conversations between those texts, would remain forever out of reach. A scholar picking up a scroll on Babylonian astronomy might have been inspired by a marginal note referencing a Greek poem we no longer possess, leading to a revolutionary idea that died with them. The library's genius was in these chance encounters, the friction of ideas across disciplines that sparked entirely new ways of thinking. This constellation of knowledge, once scattered, can never be perfectly reassembled. We are left with the known works, the fragments that survived through other channels, but the context, the connective tissue, is gone for good. This is a sobering realization. It means that some historical losses are absolute, creating a permanent silence in our collective story. The complete intellectual world of the classical mind, in all its sprawling, contradictory glory, is a landscape we can only glimpse through a fractured lens. Yet this very impossibility gives the library its enduring power. Its ghost compels us to look at our own digital repositories and ask if we are building them with the same fragility. The tragedy of Alexandria is not a relic of the distant past. It is a cautionary tale that echoes in every corrupted hard drive and every broken web link. Knowing that a complete recovery is impossible fuels our modern drive to preserve with a kind of desperate fervor. It transforms the act of saving a file or scanning a book from a simple administrative task into a profound act of defiance against the inevitable entropy of time. The lost library's greatest lesson is not about what we can regain, but about the incalculable value of what we still have left to protect. The story of a library's destruction is not just a history lesson, it is a vital tool for shaping the minds of the future. To prevent the cycle of loss from repeating itself, the tragedy of Alexandria must become a cornerstone of modern education. We teach students about the rise and fall of empires, but we must also teach them about the rise and fall of knowledge itself. Understanding how entire systems of thought can be built, how they can flourish in places like the Great Library, and how they can be shattered by fire or neglect, cultivates a profound sense of responsibility. It transforms students from passive consumers of information into active stewards of our collective memory. They learn that the data they scroll past on a screen is part of a fragile, continuous chain stretching back millennia, a chain that depends on their care to remain unbroken. This historical perspective provides a powerful lens for developing critical thinking. When a student learns how the works of Aristotle were saved by scribes, translated in Baghdad, and then returned to Europe to spark the Renaissance, they see information not as a static fact, but as a living entity that moves across cultures and through time. It teaches them to question the sources of their own knowledge. Who preserved this? Why was this saved while something else was lost? What voices are missing from our current digital library? And whose stories are we at risk of silencing today? The lessons of Alexandria force a confrontation with the long-term consequences of our actions or our inaction. A neglected hard drive, a broken web link, an unreadable file format, these are not just technical glitches, they are the modern equivalents of a crumbling scroll. By learning about the fires of antiquity, students become the architects of a more resilient future. They are the ones who will design the next generation of digital preservation, who will champion open access, and who will fight to ensure that the brilliant light of our current knowledge does not, like its ancient predecessor, flicker and fade into a forgetful dark. You are already a part of this story. The Reborn Library is not a distant fortress of knowledge, but a living network that you help build with simple, everyday actions. Your first tool is as close as your web browser. The next time you read a news article that feels historically significant, or you stumble upon a personal blog that captures the spirit of our time, you can save it. Do not just bookmark it, use the Wayback Machine to archive the page. This takes less than a minute, typing the web address into the archive.org site and clicking Save Page Now. In that single action, you become a digital scribe, ensuring that a fragile piece of our collective memory is saved from the silent decay of link rot. Your click creates another copy, another node in the distributed system that protects our story from a single point of failure. For those who love the written word, a world of recovery awaits at Wikisource. This is a vast, volunteer-driven library where people transcribe public domain texts, correcting the errors that often plague automated book scans. You could spend a quiet evening helping to proofread a page from a 19th century novel or a centuries-old philosophical treatise. Every corrected word is a small act of preservation, a direct contribution to the accuracy and longevity of our digital commons. Your participation turns a flawed digital file into a pristine, searchable text for generations to come. Support can also flow through the organizations standing on the front lines. The Internet Archive, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, and local library foundations all rely on a chorus of small supporters to continue their vital work. Even a modest donation signals that you value a future where knowledge remains open and accessible, not locked away or forgotten. This financial fuel powers the servers, funds the legal battles for fair use, and keeps the digital lights on. But perhaps the most profound shift is a change in your own mindset. Start thinking of your personal digital life as a small but important archive. Organize your own photos and documents with descriptive file names. Back up your data in multiple, secure locations. Be mindful that the emails you write and the posts you share are the raw materials of future history. You are not just a consumer of information, you are one of its countless essential guardians. There is no single heroic savior for our global memory. The true strength of the new Alexandria lies in its distributed nature, in the millions of ordinary people who each do a small part. By taking any of these steps, you join the monks in the scriptorium, the scholars in the House of Wisdom, and the librarians risking everything in war zones. You become an active participant in the oldest and most vital human endeavor, the endless work of ensuring that our shared story does not fade back into silence. The tragedy of the Great Library's loss is undeniable, but the epic of its rebirth is a testament to our species' unyielding curiosity. From the ashes of that single, vulnerable building, we have collectively constructed something far more resilient, a distributed and digital library that spans the entire globe. We have journeyed from fragile scrolls to durable servers, transforming a solitary flame into a constellation of lights that no single fire can extinguish. This long arc of history teaches us a profound and enduring lesson, that the preservation of our shared knowledge is not a task for a chosen few, but our most vital collective responsibility. Let the ghost of Alexandria serve as a permanent beacon, illuminating not what we lost, but what we must forever strive to protect. The embers of the past constantly remind us of our duty to tend the brilliant flames of the future. This brings the story directly to you. What fragment of our collective memory will you choose to safeguard? Will you archive a web page, transcribe an ancient text, or simply decide to be more mindful of the digital traces you leave behind? Share your own ideas and commitments in the comments below. And if this journey through the echoes of time has resonated with you, subscribe to continue exploring history's most captivating mysteries.